Welcome to the Uncensored Journey Podcast, a raw, unfiltered guide to truths that matter. We are diving deep, getting real about what it takes to truly transform inside and out. Ready for truth? Ready for transformation? You're in the right spot. I'm Cyndee, and with me, as always, is Gabriela. Now, let's get uncensored. Hi, Cyndee. Today, we have a very special guest. Her name's Laura Lamb. She's a menopause practitioner and has helped thousands of women going through perimenopause, menopause, and beyond, optimizing their health and learning how to successfully take back control of the hormonal roller coaster that menopause can feel like. Laura Lamb is an advocate of women's health, championing evidence-based research and providing a factual, results-driven program for women over 40 wanting to thrive during this chapter of their life. She's a member of the British Menopause Society, allowing her clients to receive the latest factual diagnosis and treatment guidelines. Laura, I've been following you on Instagram for quite a bit, and I love your content and everything that you've been putting out there. I think it's so needed. I speak for Cyndee as well as myself. We're so excited to have you on our podcast. Welcome. Great having you here.
Thank you very much. And thank you for the introduction. It always sounds pretty impressive whenever you hear your life story kind of all summed up into a couple of sentences. But yeah, thank you very much. I'm excited to have a chat and to dive deep into everything menopause.
Right before we jumped and we started recording, you were mentioning that you're in the training business. How did you transition into being a coach? And tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah. I used to be an investment risk analyst on a trading floor, so very different to what I do now in my day-to-day life. So I was doing that about 6 years ago now. So pre-pandemic, that was my life. Just never really, I enjoyed it. It was good, but I knew it wasn't what I wanted to do with my entire life. It didn't really light me up. It didn't really give me a purpose. I was always looking forward to the weekends. So I just knew that I needed a change. Health fitness is something that I've been into my entire life. So about 8 years ago, I went back to school and got trained in terms of becoming a nutritionist. And that's where it all really began. I started coaching nutrition on the side while I was still working in finance. And I just really discovered that I loved it. And so I ended that, started my business that I have today. And just a couple of years into that, I actually attended a menopausal coffee support morning, whatever you want to call it, in London, actually. And so anything that I haven't gone through myself, I usually typically try to get myself around real women who can give me real experience, because you can go and you can learn the science, and you can read the books, and you can attend courses and get all the science. But for me, the game changer has always been understanding what's it like in real life, listening to real women and knowing how to adapt the science to actual real people. That's what actually delivers results. So I attended a menopausal support group in London. It was probably my first time being around multiple menopausal women in one room. Obviously, my mum and aunties and stuff had briefly talked, but it's not really something that a lot of people talk about, mother to daughter. And so I haven't really heard a lot of it that's in personal and in terms of my own life. And I remember just sitting in the room, and there was this one woman, I'll never forget her. She was a multiple business owner. So she really had her life together. She was crazy impressive, so inspiring to hear her life story. But what she was talking about, her experience of menopause, blew my mind. Like, she was just saying that she had all the typical perimenopausal symptoms, which I'm sure we'll dive down into deep later. But she was going through severe menopausal depression and severe brain fog. And she was on the brink of actually having to leave work, close some of her businesses, leave. She just couldn't function. Couldn't function on a daily basis. Her fatigue, her energy, didn't feel like herself. She thought she was having early stages of dementia. She didn't know what was going on, but she was quite young, quote unquote. So she was like in her late 30s. And so she was being routinely dismissed by her GP. And she was saying this, and she was expressing her concerns on this, and felt like she was losing her mind, and she didn't know what was happening. And her relationship with her partner was starting to break down because she was struggling with all these vaginal concerns, and she didn't really know how to communicate this. I remember just sitting thinking, wow, has this woman got like really unlucky, or is this a thing? Is this a thing that women just don't know what this is? And like, why is her GP just like dismissing this? And so after I left that, I went down a rabbit hole of just investigating and learning and understanding that unfortunately that wasn't a one-off experience, that it's so common for women to have experiences like that. It's actually more common for women to have experiences like that than good experiences of menopause, especially with their GPs. And so that was about 5 years ago. And that kind of just really catapulted me into having a full-blown menopausal business, company, coaching team, everything. So now we're full menopause. We don't really work with anybody else that's outside of that menopausal age.
Wow. My friends are a little bit older, and so this is what I've been hearing as well. And there's a lot of anger and resentment against the Western doctors because they are getting dismissed, and they're just like, oh, it's okay. Like, just, I don't know, eat, and don't worry about it. It will go away. It's not important. So yeah, now I'm so grateful for you for creating this business and doing the work because it's so important. So important. So, do you mind explaining what is menopause in very simple terms? And then, yeah, and the follow-up question would be hormone therapy. Are there multiple kinds? I know there's quite a bit of duality. There's a lot of pros and cons, and there's a lot of myths. So I'm curious to learn about that as well.
So in a really simplified nutshell, menopause is the end of our reproductive menstrual cycle. So full menopause is declared 12 months after you've gone without a menstrual cycle. But unfortunately, that doesn't just happen overnight. We don't just wake up one morning and our reproductive hormones have just stopped. We have this period of time before that when our reproductive hormones start to decline. And it's those years that actually bring around most of our menopause symptoms. So this is what's known as perimenopause, which is very uncommonly spoken about. And so women don't really know what it is until they're in the full throes of it. And then they start to investigate and they realize that they have been in perimenopause for quite a time. So on average, women typically get their full menopause, i.e. stop their menstrual cycles, around about the ages of 45 to 51. Perimenopause, so those years where our sex hormones are starting to decline, can last anywhere up to 10 to 15 years. And so it's very common and it's very normal for women to start experiencing perimenopausal symptoms in their mid to late 30s. Post-menopause, so we have 3 stages of menopause: perimenopause, your full-blown menopause, which only lasts one day. That's your day that you have finished your 12th cycle. The day after that, you're into what is called post-menopause. And that is until end of life. So we don't get our hormones back. You're in that post-reproductive, post-menopausal state until end of life. Now, the difficulty where it comes is that we have estrogen receptors in our entire body. So we have estrogen receptors literally from the top of our heads right to the bottom of our toes. So we get a lot of menopausal symptoms. And this is where, unfortunately, there is so much lacking information because we just associate menopause with your menstrual cycle stopping or your hot flashes, when in reality, a woman can experience anywhere up to 50 different kinds of menopausal symptoms. We can have inner ear problems because of the estrogen in your ears. You can have joint pain because of the estrogen receptors in your cartilage and your bones. You can even have burning tongue sensations. You can have vertigo. You can have sexual health dysfunction. So there's a large range of menopausal symptoms because of those estrogen receptors that women rely on. This is why the HRT then is a conversation, because obviously that is replacing that estrogen decline and that the end of our estrogen as you go into post-menopause. Now, unfortunately, a lot of the confusion, the fear, and the myths surrounding HRT came from a study done in around 2002, which has now been disproven, but it was incorrect. So an incorrect study came out and it tried to suggest that HRT causes breast cancer. This was obviously thrown across all of publications, media, doctors got a handle of it, and so on. And this then just created widespread fear. The unfortunate aspect about this is that it has been disproven multiple times over the last 2 decades. But unfortunately, healthcare providers still reference that old paper, which is why when women go and speak to some doctors, there's still that very opinionated information that is being put out around HRT, even though it has been disclaimed. And the reason why that is that menopausal training is still not a mandatory part of healthcare providers. So if you're training to be a GP, even if you're training to be a GBYN in most countries, in both America and in Europe, you only really typically have about 4 hours of your entire training on menopause. And it's not even an actual mandatory part of a GP training. So this is why, unfortunately, so much information, about menopausal diagnosis and then about menopausal treatment is so unclear at present.
Wow. So where do we go to get that information? Where do we find our menopausal expert?
This is what is unfortunately is causing so much myths, misinformation, fads, everything that is being pushed towards women. Because yes, we have actually a lot of research on menopause. There's fantastic menopausal societies that do fantastic work, both advocating for more menopausal research to be done and to be creating menopausal research. But unfortunately, a lot of it is locked behind either paywalls or academia walls. So it means then that you have this large gap between the information and the education on anything in life. When there is gap, marketers can create money by creating fear in terms of this. And this is where this large gap now comes, where we have menopausal supplements, we have menopausal fad diets, we have take this and you'll be happy, take this. You can even buy hormone replacement now on Amazon. Like, it's mental because there's this large gap. And anything in life, when there's a large gap, you can create mass fear, and people make a lot of money when there is mass fear. So unfortunately, right now, where women turn for attention and turn for education is social media. Social media is not regulated. You can put anything out on social media, and this is where that misinformation comes to. There's obviously a lot of fantastic resources that you can use. So firstly, we have both the societies. So we have the North American Menopause Society. We also have the British Menopause Society. These are both free platforms. They both put out regulated information. They both put out factual information. So any member of the public can actually join either of these societies, read the journals and so on. But not a lot of people have time for that. Not a lot of people have time to read through journals and get this information and what they actually need to learn. So there is some credited people. So like Dr. Mary Claire Haver, probably anybody that's going through menopause will know her work in terms of social media. She's fantastic. She puts out a lot of information free. She does her own sort of research. We also have built our own Menopausal Lab, so myself and my team, which is again entirely free. And we've taken all the information from both the North American and the British Menopause Society and made it a lot more user-friendly in terms of just breaking it right down and giving step-by-steps. But at present, there is still a large gap and a large area that we need to go to actually try and help educate women so that they can take back control of their own health.
Gosh, that's so important. So when it comes to hormone therapy, can you talk a little bit about how long someone needs to take it, at what stage in the menopause it's recommended to do it, and is there a specific brand or company that they work with, or how does that work?
So firstly, it has to be FDA regulated. Okay, so there is, if it's not FDA regulated, so there's a lot of bioidentical hormones that are going around at the minute that are not FDA regulated. So if it's FDA regulated, clearly state on the branding, in the packaging and so on, and it is FDA regulated. At present, that's probably something that everybody should be very careful of. But you can start PHRT at the moment that you start to experience symptoms. Okay, so there doesn't need to be a certain age. You don't need to wait until your final cycle. You don't need to wait till you have a regular cycle. As soon as you start to experience any of those kind of like 50 different types of perimenopausal symptoms, you can begin to take PHRT. It is always recommended to obviously speak to your medical care or your medical advisor. Not everybody is in a health position where they can take HRT. So if you have any kind of hormonal cancer risk or anything in your family, that's where you are a wee bit more borderline, and that's when you would go and speak to your healthcare provider and they would advise you correctly. But at present, the benefits of HRT far outweigh the risks. And the fears that have a lot been going around HRT have been disproven so many times. But we do need to keep down the dosage to the lowest possible region. Now, there's lots of different HRTs that you can have. You can have oral HRTs, so that would be things like your pills and so on. You can also have local HRT, things like creams, which is great if you're having vaginal dryness, if you're having any kind of skin concerns. You can also use like a vaginal ring if you're having any vaginal atrophy symptoms and so on. So there's lots of different ways. You can also have a patch. You can have estrogen gels. So there's lots of different forms. If you don't feel comfortable taking an oral form, which will be obviously transported into like your organs and so on. So there is lots of different forms that you can take for HRT. The reason why we keep the dosage as low as possible is that we can obviously help to keep the risks, any kind of risks as we go. There is no age limit to HRT. You can take HRT to the day you die. You can have a patch on you when you are on your deathbed. There is no reason to stop HRT if you're in a medically safe place to take HRT. How we go about starting HRT, because this is where a lot of women unfortunately don't get a lot of correct information from their GP, and then hence they go years with either the incorrect dosage or not getting any dosage at all. So what you would want to do is take a full list of all your menopausal symptoms. If you're not aware of the menopausal symptoms, you will find this both on my social media. You can find them on either of those North American or the British Menopause Society boards, or you can find them inside of our free Menopausal Lab. So you would take a full list of your menopausal symptoms and you would go to your GP or whoever you want to go to in terms of GBYN, etc., and present obviously your symptoms and be asking what are your HRT options. This is then potluck. So if you've got a good trained GP or somebody who's aware of menopausal information, you will probably get HRT straight away. But currently on average, women need to go through 7 GP visits before they get HRT. Most women then give up. So this is where a lot of women then don't get HRT. They go to their GP, they are dismissed for menopause, so they leave their GP, they think it's in their head, they don't go back to their GP because they're maybe embarrassed or they think their GP is correct, and then they spend years not getting any kind of treatment. But it is important to know that unfortunately, on average at the minute, women have to go through 7 different visits before their GP diagnoses them with menopause and before they get HRT.
Wow. That's a lot of doctors, and unfortunate. Right now, there's no specialist out there, or there's no branch of doctors that are specializing in menopause. Is there?
There is. Yeah,
How do we find them?
There's a very small handful. So again, any kind of doctor or GBYN that is menopausally trained will be listed in either the British Menopause or the North American Menopause Society or even the Australian Menopause Society, depending on where you are in the world. So they will be listed on there, but they are very small. So if we think of it as menopausal specialist in America, for example, current studies show that there's one menopausal specialist for every 83,000 women in America. So obviously the demand is very high. So there's not a lot of information there. So it is very important, unfortunately, for women to become advocates of their own health. And this is where it is important that it shouldn't be the case. We shouldn't be having conversations like this. This should not be an issue, but it is. So when you're going into menopause, you unfortunately just have to accept this is our scenario. This is what we're dealt with as women. It should have to be, hopefully generations come behind us don't have this, but this is our current reality. So it is important for you to become educated and know how to advocate for your own health and know how to have conversations with your doctor, know what the menopausal symptoms are, know what your treatment options are, and know what to do if you get dismissed, and expect a dismissal from your GP and what to do next so that you can get proper treatment.
I wanted to go back a little bit to perimenopause and how it's funny. I was looking at your Instagram this morning and I was like, oh, she's talking about this right here, right now. It's exactly what I wanted to talk about on the show. What are the top 3 to 5 symptoms that would indicate that you're absolutely entering perimenopause? Is there a such thing, or is it really dependent person to person?
It is dependent person to person, but we'll go through the most common menopausal symptoms that we will typically hear time and time again. So we are obviously, most people are aware of things like hot flashes. So that's going to be one of the most common ones. Any kind of like hot flashes or night sweat is going to be pretty common. Any kind of thing like changes to your cycle. So if your cycle is becoming shorter, longer, if you are having a heavier or a lighter period, so any kind of changes to your cycle. It is important to note that we don't have to have an irregular cycle to be perimenopause, although that is one of the reasons why a lot of women get dismissed. You don't need to have an irregular cycle, but it is a very common symptom. Mood swings is a very common symptom. So feeling flat, unmotivated, erratic moods, so feeling quite irritable, having like higher anxiety, feeling like snapping at people, getting more cross individuals. So that kind of mood swings is a very common one. And actually what's becoming a lot more common is brain fog. So any kind of feelings of like haziness, not being able to focus, things like forgetting simple things like walking into a room and not really understanding why you were there and so on. So those are probably the most three common ones that we will see time and time again with our perimenopause clients.
Great. Thank you. So what are the other common myths that come to mind or misconceptions about menopause that you found throughout your journey?
Yeah, it's a lot of myth when it comes to the diagnosis, especially of menopause. So there's no such thing as being too young. So you can go into menopause at any age, okay? So there is no such thing as being too young. And there's no such thing as a blood test. So you cannot have a blood test to show if you're in perimenopause. So things like your FSH levels start to fluctuate on a daily basis when women start to go into perimenopause. And this is where a lot of those dismissals will come from. So women will go to their doctors will give them a blood test. They'll say their bloods look fine, and then they're dismissed. When a blood test, this is according to the guidelines that we have at present, blood tests should not be being utilized for menopausal women. So if you're going to your doctor and you're getting a blood test, that is incorrect. They're probably the two biggest myths when it comes to the diagnosis. Then when it comes to things like treatments, now this isn't a myth. It's not going to go wrong, but it has been massively overhyped on social media, and it's something that I see time and time again. It's fasting. So we see this all the time over social media, that fasting is the answer for menopause, and fasting is what's going to help symptoms, and fasting is what's going to help the menopausal weight gain and so on. And that's not wrong, but when we think of a long list of treatment options and things that actually do help with menopausal symptoms and menopausal weight gain, fasting is so low down that list. Fasting is actually not even referenced or recommended by any board certified menopausal specialist, or in terms of either the North American or the British Menopause Societies. So that's something that we see a lot of people making money on social media with right now, is targeting menopausal women with fasting. And it is massively much more of a social media hype. Another thing is supplements. Oh my gosh, these are everywhere on social media, targeting women in that they need to have supplements. And they just stick the word menopause in front of the name supplement. They make the box pink, and then they charge 10 times the price. We do not need supplements. The only supplement that a woman is recommended to take in her menopausal years is vitamin D. The rest of her vitamins and minerals can be through food. Now, if you have a food intolerance, or it's hard for you to get a certain mineral or vitamin from food, then yeah, cool, take a supplement. But we don't need supplements. All those green powders, all those menopausal magnesium, menopausal, anything that you see on social media, you don't need it.
Oh, that's curious because I'm of the belief, I completely agree with the menopausal products, but in terms of supplements and minerals, our earth is not, we've agricultured it to death, so that there's just not the same minerals and vitamins and that we get now that we used to get 100 years from. How come, like, how can women get absorbed? Because it's not just about getting it, right? If you don't have the right gut health and your microbiome is not functioning correctly, how can you absorb all those substances and all those good things from the food?
But then correct your gut health. So if you're having concerns that your gut health is not optimal to absorb or break down your nutrients to absorb them into your intestinal linings, then optimize your gut health. So all women will experience a shift in the bacteria diversity of their microbiome in all three regions, in terms of their skin microbiome, their gut microbiome, as well as their vagina microbiome, around about the ages of 40. And it continues to decline ever since from about 45 onwards. So it's really important for all women to become aware that their gut health does decline as they go through menopause for lots of different reasons, mainly being those hormonal shifts. So all women will start to experience an onset of gut issues as they go through menopause. This will either show up in external things like acne, low energy, sleep concerns, visceral fat gain around their core, and then those kind of more common ones like constipation, diarrhea, bloating, and so on. So yes, it's very important for women to be concerned with getting enough probiotic food, prebiotic food, removing food that maybe will cause irritation when it comes to digestion, which can obviously stop any kind of things in terms of breaking down and so on. It's also important to note that your intestinal lining becomes thinner as you go through menopause. It's the same as the lining in our vaginas, and this is why painful sex and so on is very common as women go through menopause. But yes, the absorption of your minerals does change. So this is what we would call a metabolism shift in menopause. So social media tells us that our metabolism shifts and this is what causes weight. That's incorrect. That doesn't really occur in women until about the ages of 65. But your metabolism in terms of how your body breaks down and absorbs minerals does change. And that changes around about the ages of 40. So it's important then, if you've never tracked your food or you've never tracked any kind of mineral intake, in order to track that. So usually with our clients, we will track their mineral intake for about 2 weeks to see exactly what they actually are getting from their body. And we will be tracking their menopausal symptoms. So most menopausal symptoms are signs of mineral deficiencies. And then it's just a case of pairing those things up. So if we're having women that are, quote unquote, getting enough minerals according to their tracking or their app in certain foods, but yet they're still experiencing some kind of menopausal symptom, that's then we will be able to be confidently know that the person maybe has a lower absorption of some of her minerals, or some of her food doesn't have as much minerals because of agriculture changes and so on. And then what we would simply do is increase that mineral intake.
Got it. So what are some of the common minerals and vitamins that women in going through menopause experience? What are the top?
Yeah. So magnesium is one that is usually commonly deficient in all women in a way. So usually our body does utilize magnesium a lot quicker than it can actually create. Magnesium is usually one. Now, again, it's very easy to get enough magnesium from your actual food intake. So we typically wouldn't have to lean towards a magnesium supplement unless somebody was really struggling with sleep in the beginning while we're working through her sleep hygiene. That would maybe be a reason why we would lean towards magnesium supplement. But magnesium is very much a common one that definitely we would look at in terms of menopausal health. Vitamin E and vitamin B12 would also be very common. Again, very simple to get through your actual food. And then depending on inner ear problems and itchy skin, which is very common with women that they go through. So things like tinnitus, ringing ears, itchy ears, vertigo, dry skin, itchy skin, irritation of skin. If you're having any of those symptoms, which again are very common, but 1 in 3 women will experience these, vitamin B12 and zinc would be the ones that you'd be looking for in terms of those. And then if you have any kind of vaginal neuropathy symptoms, again, the omega-3s and the vitamin E's will be ones that you'll be looking to increase for those.
Thank you. In terms of lifestyle and in terms of lifestyle, like what do you recommend? I don't know if you're familiar with Mindy Pelz. She promotes fasting according to your cycle and then advocate for once you're in menopause, follow the same cycle. So eating a certain way, working out a certain way. And I've been following that. It works for me. I don't believe I'm in perimenopause yet. So what are your thoughts on that?
So we follow the science and we follow what has been with the evidence. So as I mentioned, currently there is no clinical trials or clinical study on fasting. So fasting, like I say, it has been shown to work. It's a much further down a list of effective treatments. And it's currently not stood over by any kind of menopausal board. So it's not something that we utilize with any of our clients because we are evidence-based and we follow the science in terms of that. So we don't use fasting with our clients. That's my thoughts and opinions on that element. When it comes to lifestyle in general, nothing massively needs to change. It's not like we're going to menopause and our bodies become completely different. Like core foundational habits still exist. So things like whole food, looking at in terms of mineral dense food, looking after your sleep, your water intake, stress management tools, moving your body and so on. The core foundations don't need to change. And this is where a lot of women then get very confused and get caught up in some of those more gimmicky things on social media. Because again, like I was saying, they have that huge gap between the actual facts and the women that needs it. And then this is where those gimmicks and those fads then can really exist on social media.
Okay, great. I know Cyndee has a couple questions to ask you.
I was just curious about on your opinion on your hormones never being altered throughout your life. So like let's say somebody who's never had any kids or never had any kind of pregnancies, or like, is there any determining factors on how menopause hits you, childbearing women versus non-childbearing women?
There's a lot of research being done currently on that. So we are trying to understand why women are going into menopause earlier. So women are going into menopause earlier generation to generation. So at present, it's between 45 to 51, but like 20, 30 years ago, it was closer to 60. And they're predicting it's going to be like late 30s in the next sort of 15 years. So they're doing a lot of research to try and understand why. And that's actually one of the things they're doing a lot of work on. So trying to understand, is there a relation in terms of women who have never had a child compared to a woman who has had a pregnancy or a birth? Because yes, they obviously, the change of your hormones, those postnatal hormones, etc., are implementing in terms of how women early, first, you're going into menopause, and then secondly, their heightened symptoms. But at present, there's no definitive proof on that, but there is a lot of research being done, and that the kind of avenue that that research is pointing to is that women who have had children and women who haven't had a pregnancy or any kind of childbearing pregnancies, there is a difference between their menopausal experience and how early they're going into menopause.
So would you say that somebody who has not had children go into menopause later or earlier?
It's not definitive, so there's no black and white answer, and it varies from person to person because there's a lot of other contributing factors. So stress is a big one, genes in general, as well as just natural well-being. So there's no definitive answer at present, but they're trying to show that menopausal women who haven't had children are going into menopause later. But again, there's no definitive black and white answer.
Is that research also covering like people who've never, so I've never taken any kind of hormonal birth controls or anything along those lines. So there hasn't been any alterations to my hormones or my ever. So I'm wondering do you know if that will have a factor? Are they studying that piece too about?
They're studying that, but at present, there's no definitive answer in terms of that. So at present, there's no clear way to show, or there's no clear research or studies to be shown that those individuals have. For example, literally, actually today, I was speaking to a woman who kind of the same element of yourself. She's never been on any kind of hormonal birth control. She hasn't had any kids, and she's been into menopause at age 35. So she's having a lot of menopausal symptoms. She believes it's stress triggered. So she went through a really stressful event in her life, and she believes it's stress triggered. Whereas we took on a client who was in her early 50s. She had 6 kids, and she didn't go into menopause until about the age of 55. So again, it completely varies from woman to woman. And that's why it's hard for us to show women why women are going into menopause early, why certain women are having more menopausal symptoms compared to others, because at present there is some varying factors between woman to woman, unfortunately.
Is there also studies? I'm just wondering because the food in America is trash. Everything is soy based. Everything has soy underlinings. And we know from all the studies that soy mimics estrogen in your system and kind of fucks everything up. It did for me. Like I was a vegan for almost 18 years and that messed up. My hormones don't balance well. My cortisol levels are fucked and like all this stuff. But long story short is I'm wondering about like just diets in general, or the food like in other countries, like our food and other countries' food that we eat here regularly is illegal. We're constantly being fed chemicals and bad things. So I'm wondering if you have any information about how this plays out from country to country. Because that woman who had 6 kids, and she might live in a country where the food is amazing, right? But the woman who like has menopause at 35, who's never altered her hormones, might live in a country where food is trash, and that could play a factor.
Yeah, 100%. So actually, both of those examples, they both actually were from the state. But yes, so they're actually currently looking at Asian women. The diet in terms of those kind of more Asian region countries are showing that those kind of women are experiencing less menopausal symptoms. So that's research that's currently going on right now. It's very hard, though, to get funding to confirm that, especially when we think of where those biggest fundings are coming from. It is America. So unfortunately, not a lot of American funding are going to go out to show that diet or food choices is going to be different there, because obviously a lot of companies will suffer from that. So it is very hard to get that, and that's why this research is actually so long coming. But that's one place they're looking at right now, is an Asian diet or an Asian approach, and to understanding why. Because yes, they have shown that women with an Asian heritage or women that are living in those kind of countries are having longer menopause, so they're going into menopause at a later age, and they're having less menopausal symptoms. But again, there's no definitive answer at that. There's still research undergoing on that.
Awesome. I'm really curious because all of these factors, because all of my mom's sisters had hysterectomies. So like they they didn't go through menopause or forced menopause. And my mom, hers was a little bit different. So I was just, I don't know. I don't have anything to base off of what to expect for mine. And I'm going to be 46 in a couple of months, and I haven't experienced any symptoms. So I'm like, what is happening? What's going to happen in my world? Because my period still comes every 28 days. It's not even a heavy period. I've never had a heavy period. I've never all of the stuff all of the symptoms.
One of the reasons why we're in such a mess with women's hormonal health in general, so not even just menopause, just hormonal health in general, is because we've always been told that there's a normal and that there's a normal box and that we all should fit this normal box when it comes to hormonal health. And the reality is there's no such thing as normal. There's no such thing as a one size fits all answer to everybody's hormonal health. But because we aren't taught that, or because we aren't really educated to learn what our normal is from a young age, what is a normal cycle for you? What are your normal cycle symptoms? What is a normal length for your cycle? What is a normal anything to do in terms of your hormonal health? Even when it comes to blood tests, there's actually not a quote unquote normal. There's a normal range, but there's no such thing as this is what everybody's cortisol levels should look like. And this is what everybody's hormonal health should look like. There's no such thing as that. So this is why we get into such this gray area, because everybody's trying to put themselves in a box, and the GPs, GBYNs, etc., all love a tick box. They all love something that says you're this, you're this. Whereas a woman's hormonal health, as we're all aware, that doesn't exist. We don't have that. Everybody's body is different. Everybody's hormonal health is different. So a big thing that we're actually trying to push is to try and educate girls from a very young age around their menstrual health, and trying to educate them around hormonal health in general, to get them to understand what's normal for them. So as soon as they start to see anything that isn't normal for them, that's when they can go and ask for help, and they can get educational help. Because you know yourself, you go to your GP or whatever it is with heavy periods or whatever it is, and you're told, oh, that's just normal, that's just your cycle, when in reality it's not normal for you. So it may be normal for somebody else, but it's not normal for you. And this is where it comes to that menopausal health. Women haven't been given that power and that empowerment of your hormonal health is unique to you. So let's get to know what your hormonal health is. What are these signs? What's it actually telling you? So there is nothing really to expect as a checklist of what menopause should look like. It looks very different for each woman. And trying just to educate women on these are common symptoms, these are common ages that people can go into this. This is the kind of things that you're expected to undersee possibly. This is where a lot of that power is going to come from, rather than trying again to put all women in that kind of one box of what should be normal with hormonal health at any age.
With everything that you just explained is exactly why I do not do Western medicine, period, hard pass. So I was curious to know if there's any natural options for, I guess, what HRT or anything along those lines for people that I don't take medicines or anything like that, other than natural. And also my holistic doctor, I've been with her for a really long time. So if something ever changes, she knows she thinks differently than a MD or somebody in a Western medicine field. So do you have any suggestions for people who are not Western medicine-ly inclined?
So I actually specialize in the natural aspect of menopause. So we don't prescribe HRT to any of our clients, and for a couple of different reasons. So we work very closely with cancer patients who cannot take HRT. For most of them, some of them can, but most of them cannot take HRT. And a lot of women just simply don't want to. Yes, we don't prescribe our HRT. That doesn't mean that women that work with us don't take HRT, but the vast majority don't. So for a vast majority of menopausal symptoms, they can be completely reduced via nutritional lifestyle changes. So for example, hot flashes and outfit. I personally wouldn't recommend the need for HRT to help these. So typically on average, we get these completely reduced after about 5 to 6 weeks of leaning towards a more anti-inflammatory diet, getting your omega-3 up, replacing a lot more meat sources to plant-based proteins and so on. But yeah, we don't need HRT to help with things like hot flashes. The same with joint pain and so on. So HRT can definitely be a tool in a toolbox. But even if somebody was to take HRT, it's a hormone. So it's not as effective as what your underlying health is, and what drives your underlying health is your nutrition. So for all the protocols that we have, and again, this is following guidelines from both the North American and the British Menopause Society, for all the guidelines that we have to treat any kind of menopause symptom, there is always natural ones. So gut health is a big one. Gut health links back to a lot of the menopausal symptoms. So brain health and brain fog, sorry, links back to your gut health. Things like mood swings link back to your gut health. Sleep links back to your gut health. The gut health will be a major protocol in treating menopausal symptoms naturally, and more so the anti-inflammatory hormone. So obviously estrogen is a fantastic anti-inflammatory hormone to protect from inflammation. So a lot of the menopausal symptoms, so things like weight gain, things like bone density concerns, things like brain fog, things like joint pain, visceral fat, vaginal neuropathy symptoms, and so on, link back to inflammation. There are inflammation symptoms, even like menopausal acne is an inflammation symptom. So adopting a more anti-inflammatory diet is going to be key for any menopausal woman that wants to really look after their health naturally, as well as aid their long-term menopausal health.
So I have a question about that because I saw you put a lot of emphasis on fiber as in some of your content. And as it relates to fiber, I understand that the reason for that is to carry out excess estrogen, correct? Is that what
No, not yet.
purpose for that?
One aspect, but most of it is
Okay.
down, like I was mentioning, the huge gut shifts that we experience as they go through menopause. So most of that, the reason why we push higher fiber intake in menopausal women is to help with the mineral absorption, is to help with the gut health, is to help with those menopausal symptoms, is to help with that kind of menopausal aspect.
Mhm. And I also saw that you recommend to switch from animal protein to plant-based. What are the plant-based options that you recommend? And where do you stand on soy product or high quality soy, just soy in general? Because I know that Cyndee, and as I'm learning, the more I educate myself, I'm learning that it's not the best option.
So there's not one size fits all answer for anything when it comes to health or nutrition or anything. So I don't believe in any kind of blanket statements. Now, when it comes to the animal and the plant-based, so again, that's not one size fits all. But the reason why we, especially for women that are really struggling with night sweats, so it's really great tool in terms of night sweat, is because animals are meat-based protein for short temperature. So if anybody's obviously struggling with any kind of temperature dysregulation, like hot sweat, night sweat, so on, it isn't great then to put in more like meat sources that are going to actually increase your temperature. So that's the only reason why we'll push that. If somebody is like a client is struggling with a lot of night sweats and so on. But we have lots of clients that have just meat-based proteins and they don't really have any kind of concerns, and so it works well for them. We have other clients and they just can't digest it, so we lean towards more plant-based. So it really comes down to what's going to work for an individual basis. But when it comes to the plant-based, yeah, lots of different aspects in terms of tofu. We lean actually to a lot more vegetables in terms of like beans, legumes, and so on, to actually try and get that kind of protein aspect up. Again, it really just comes down to the individual. So some women, there's no such thing as a black and white answer in terms of everybody should be getting this amount of protein and this has to be it varies. It varies in terms of how much protein a person can digest. Some people struggle to digest a lot higher protein, so slightly lower protein is going to be better for that individual. Some people just don't have access to higher quality plant-based sources. So again, it's going to be just better for that person to have slightly less and have better quality rather than trying to push that protein and maybe relying heavily on supplements and things like that. So again, it just comes down to that individual. When it comes to the soy products, yes, there is a lot of research to show that a lot of high soy content in your kind of diet overall isn't really the best option. Does that mean that we need to completely reduce it, never have a single trace of it? If you want to do that, cool, but it doesn't necessarily mean that we have to totally 100% eliminate it. Sometimes it can be quite hard based on just where you live in the world or kind of what food you have access to. But I definitely would probably advise to try and keep it to the minimum and trying to reduce it where possible.
Thank you. Yes. That's great. Yes, one size does not fit all. I agree. And so what kind of diet do you recommend? I know that you can't make a broad statement or a general statement, but just what are some tips or hacks on how we should eat in general when we're in that stage, especially when it comes to carbohydrates, because fiber is great. And then there's such thing as carbohydrate toxicity. And there's a lot of doctors out there that do recommend lowering your carb throughout your life. And of course, having a holistic and a whole food diet helps. And I'm not talking about junk food carbs. I'm talking about carbs in general, carbs coming from legumes, plants, etc.
Yeah. As we go through menopause, and we, like I said, we lose our estrogen, and inflammation in women increases. So if we look at one of the major points that we can track inflammation is a woman's visceral fat. On average, your visceral fat in a woman will go from about being dormant, which is about 5% of your body fat, to in and around 15 to 20% as women go through their late stages of perimenopause into postmenopause. That's a complete natural shift. That's got nothing to do with eating too much. It's got nothing to do with not exercising enough and so on. That is driven by things like inflammation, mainly hormonal shifts, and even insulin resistance. So that's the biggest tracker that we have currently to show that inflammation is a major concern as women go through that menopausal shift, the increase of that visceral fat, because this isn't happening in men. So one of the biggest things that we have right now to stand on then is leaning towards a more anti-inflammatory diet. So this can be called a Mediterranean diet. It can be called an anti-inflammatory diet. It's basically trying to bring things back to truth. So reducing any kind of inflammatory triggers. This is not only going to help with menopausal symptoms at present, so things like your hot flashes, your joint pain, your vaginal concerns, skin concerns, and so on. That will help that. It'll also help with long-term menopausal health. So things like your bone health, your gut health, your brain health, and so on, in terms of trying to keep that inflammation down. So leaning toward a more anti-inflammatory diet. So like I say, firstly starting reducing, don't need to totally eliminate. Sometimes life is all about balance, but like definitely trying to reduce your inflammatory triggers. So this is things like alcohol, processed foods, refined sugars, definitely trying to keep them at a minimum, a very low minimum where possible. And then leaning towards more of an anti-inflammatory. So this will be starting with things like healthy fats, kind of lean plant-based protein, whole foods, so things like your whole grains, your legumes, and then aspects in terms of obviously fruit and veg, as well as nuts and seeds. And this is actually an area that we see a lot of women coming to us that are really deficient on in terms of healthy fat. So a big diet culture is avoiding fat. Everything is low fat, and fat is bad, and fat makes it fat and everything. On average, that's actually probably the biggest thing that we'll see women deficient on is healthy fats. And so again, that's going to be one of the reasons why their inflammation is going so high, is because they've spent their whole life fearing fats and having everything as low calorie options and low calorie fat and low fat everything. And then this is obviously where they run into health concerns at a later age.
Yes. We had an episode. We recorded one recently, and yes, we love fats. Fats are so good for the body. And I agree. There's massive propaganda out there about this.
Massive.
And
that was one that we'll see a lot of women fearing of having fat, like nuts and seeds, avocados, any kind of oils, anything, fish, fatty fish. They're just so afraid, unfortunately, of fat, because they have, like you say, been inundated with propaganda where fats are bad, and then they're missing out that huge portion of the balanced diet.
So I did not know. I want to go back to, you mentioned that there's a skin microbiome. I knew there was a gut microbiome and a reproductive system microbiome, but I did not know about the skin. So
yeah, we have a microbiome in our skin, and this shifts and alters as we go through menopause for lots of different reasons. Main one being our estrogen levels, because estrogen plays a skin nurse functionality. So this is where women, menopausal acne is very common. So women will experience an onset of menopausal acne as they go through menopause. Now, it is more inflammatory linked. So that's again where that leaning towards that anti-inflammatory diet help with that. But other women can experience things like hives, so an onset of hives that they've never had before, irritation, broken skin, dry skin, burning sensation at the bottom of your hands, bottom of your feet, a crawling sensation, itchy skin. So yes, skin shifts, massively common. So typically on average, one will experience skin shifts, and it's a lot of it down to that shift, in your microbiome in your skin.
okay, that's very helpful, and that's good to look out for. In regards to the vaginal microbiome, what are some things that you recommend, and outside of having the right diet and staying away from inflammatory foods, do Kegels help? Because it's a muscle ultimately. Yeah. So does that support it?
Yeah, so this is an aspect called vaginal neuropathy in menopause, and it's 1 and 2, so it's so common. And unfortunately, sexual health and vaginal health is such a taboo in women. We just don't talk about it at all. And links right back to even what we were saying earlier. No one really knows even what their normal vaginal health is, because it's not anything we're really talked about. We're never really taught about it. And so unfortunately, a lot of women think this is normal. They think these symptoms are a normal part of aging, and they're not. They never get better by themselves, and then unfortunately they get worse. It's not a normal part of life to just have low libido. It's not a normal part of life to just have vaginal dryness. It shouldn't be, it's not a normal part of life to have pain when you're having intercourse. These are all signs of vaginal neuropathy, and they all need to be treated. So firstly, that huge education around just women understanding firstly what vaginal health is, and understanding that it is a huge aspect of health and that it's important and none of this should be normalized. It comes down into what symptoms that you're experiencing underneath that umbrella of vaginal neuropathy in terms of what you would go about treating it. So we'll have things, vaginal burning, vaginal irritation, vaginal dryness, heightened sensation to underwear. So a lot of women are unfortunately unable to actually wear any underwear. This is a big reason actually right now why women are leaving the workforce, is because they're being forced to work in public places, can't work remote, and they're having heightened sensitivity to wearing trousers or underwear. They don't know it's normal. They think there's something weird with them, and they're leaving the workforce because of this. That's actually a big concern right now in women in the workplace. Things like low libido, very common. 83% of menopausal women will experience low libido, recurring UTIs, and things like pelvic floor. So yes, diet is so important in terms of inflammation. Again, a lot of those symptoms link back to inflammation in your vaginal health. Pelvic floor is a big one. So at present, the current protocol is all menopausal women. So as soon as you start to see any kind of symptoms of menopause, you should be doing frequent pelvic floor exercises. So a muscle, like you rightly said, all muscles in our body decline as we go through with age, pelvic floor being one of them. So at present, in and around 90% of postmenopausal women have pelvic floor symptoms. Again, they're not even aware of what pelvic symptoms are, and they think it's normal to urinate when you sneeze, or they think it's normal to pee a little bit when you jump and do exercises, and it's not. All not normal, and it should be looked after. But your pelvic floor doesn't just help with regards to leak in urine, it also stimulates blood flow in your pelvic health regions, which can help with low libido. It can help with vaginal dryness. It can help with recurring UTIs even. As soon as you start to go through your menopausal area, you should be doing pelvic floor exercises. Other ones that you can help and do is terms of just staying hydrated. So a lot of those symptoms link back to dehydration. Again, menopausal women, their thirst levels shift when they go through menopause. So it's very common for women to be dehydrated and not even know that they're dehydrated. So having enough water. Even shifting things like your healthcare products. So maybe shifting away from things with any kind of like fragrances in them and so on, anything that can irritate, because like I said, your microbiome has shifted. And so in the same way as your skincare routine may need to change, how you obviously stay hygiene and stay healthy and clean may need to change as well.
That's amazing. Thank you so much for sharing. And tell us, I know that a program, and how do people connect with you? How long is the program that you have, and how can we educate ourselves even more?
Yeah. So firstly, yes, I do have a program. I am a menopause practitioner, and I have a full team of menopause practitioners behind me, and we serve women globally now, worldwide. But like I said at the very beginning, one of the biggest concerns right now is that so much information is behind paywall. So I don't even actually want to promote that. I want to promote my free community. So we have a completely free portal where it hosts a full menopausal course. So how to actually diagnose and treat, how to actually approach your GP when you get dismissed, the letter that you can actually send your GP in terms of your dismissal, the actual treatments that you can have right now. So all HRT options, if you don't want to use HRT, all the natural options, everything in terms of nutrition, everything in terms of exercise. So literally everything that a woman would ever need to know about menopause is inside that portal. We also have regular, amazing menopausal experts worldwide that come in and speak to our women. So right now, actually, we're talking about skin there. We're actually getting ready to have a dermatologist that will come in and talk about menopausal skin shifts and so on. So that's something that I would love to promote more, because for me, I don't think any education should be protected behind paywall. If somebody wants to work with me one-to-one, you can find the information in there to do that. But I would just recommend in general, joining that fantastic resource, because it's something that myself and my team have worked very hard to all educational menopause and not having any paywalls behind it.
That sounds amazing. Thank you so much. I will definitely join.
Yes, thank you so much, Laura. I'll speak for both of us. We really appreciate you being here and sharing your knowledge with us. It's been enlightening, that's for sure. Can you tell people where they can find you on media?
Yeah. So you can, I'm sure there'll be links underneath this as well, but my social media is just Laura Lambs, Lambe for my surname. Those where you'll be able to find me primarily on media on Instagram. We also do a lot of TikTok. Actually, we do a lot more TikTok videos than we do on our Instagram. So you can find me either or there. And my portal that I was just referencing there is linked in both of those, and it's called the Menopausal Lab.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And thank you everybody for joining us this week. Please can subscribe on all platforms, and you can follow us on Instagram and TikTok at The Uncensored Journey. You can find me at The Worth Warrior, and you can find links to Gabriela's social media at phoenixmedicine.me. Until next week, bye.